now that we went through the brief history of the guitar and the anatomy of the guitar, it's time to get into the fun stuff, which is learning how to play the guitar. The first step in learning this part is where do you actually put your fingers on the neck of the guitar? Well, you can put them anywhere, but to make it sound good, you have to know where the individual notes are and which ones go good together. We're going to split this section up into 4 parts. First, the open strings. Second, the musical alphabet. Third, whole steps and half steps. And finally, fourth, putting it all together. When you look at the fretboard from the front, you'll see 6 strings from left to right. If you tuned your guitar correctly, hey, I wanted to pause just to let you know that you can learn more about this in our Learning How to Change the Strings of Your Guitar video. Okay, back to this segment. Then each string should be a specific letter or note. Starting at the left is the thickest string. This is the low E string. The next string to the right should be an A string, and then D, and then G, next up is B, and finally we end with another E string. But this E is the thinnest string of them all. If you're holding your guitar correctly, the low E string is going to be to the one at the top closest to your arm, and the high E string is going to be the one at the bottom closest to your knee. The pattern goes from left to right, or top to bottom. E, A, D, G, B, E. This is called the open E tuning. Before we get started, we're going to learn the alphabet. Now, I know, you already know your ABCs. We're going to be covering the music alphabet. This one is not as long as the original. The musical alphabet is made up of only 7 letters. Or in the guitar music world, we'll call them notes. If we start on A, we'll continue going up until we hit G. For example, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Once we get to the G, the musical alphabet starts over again. So it go back to A. For example, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. That pattern would then just repeat. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so on. The same idea, or what musicians call music theory, applies if you start at any letter or note. For example, if we start on the letter or note E, the musical alphabet would continue this way: E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. The musical alphabet always resets itself after the letter or note G. These letters or note are what we call the natural notes. If you've ever seen a piano, these notes are all the same as the white keys. Later on, we're going to be getting into sharps and flats, which are the black keys on the piano also. Let's move on to what are whole steps and half steps. In our previous video called The Anatomy of the Guitar, we talked about this piece of the guitar called the fretboard or the neck board. We talked about how on the neck they have these rectangular areas called the frets. As you move from one fret to the next one, it's called a half step. As you move from one fret and skip one fret, so every other fret, it's called a whole step. Half and whole steps will become even more important when we start talking about the scales. But for now, let's go ahead and take the alphabet and the steps and put them together. In our musical alphabet, we already know that it goes from A to G and then repeats itself. As we move through the musical alphabet on the fretboard though, each letter or note is separated by a whole step. Except for between B and C and E and F, because between B and C is a half step or 1 fret, and in between E and F is a half step or only 1 fret. We can turn this into a pattern that goes like this if we are starting on A. Whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. For our practice, since the 6th string is an open E string, we're going to start on E. So our pattern is going to look like this. Half, whole, 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 half, whole, whole. When we follow this pattern, the sound should start to sound a little familiar. Remember that old song you'd have to sing as a kid? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Well, that's a scale. More on this later. So to finish up, this is the way that you can find out where any letter or note is on the neckboard. For the last example, let's pick another string. How about this one? This is the 4th string, or referred to as the D string. So since we're starting on the D string, this is how our musical alphabet's going to go. Whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. If we play the D string open, which means not pushing down on any frets, then the next letter E will be a whole step up. So F will be a half step, G will be a whole step, A will be a whole step, B will be a whole step, C will be a half step, and then D will be a whole step away. And that completes our musical alphabet. In closing, remember these 3 key points. The first is the open strings are E, A, D, G, B, E from starting on the left. Our musical alphabet is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, or 7 letters, or note, long. And finally, a half step is 1 fret, and a whole step is 2 frets. In the next segment, we're going to be looking at scales and why they matter.